Washington Journal continues.
Our first guest is Representative Nanette Barragan. She is a Democrat from California, serves the 44th District, and also a member of the Homeland Security Committee. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
For those who may not know you on this program, a little bit about your background that brought you to Congress and how you use that to kind of help you make decisions in issues of immigration like DACA and the Dreamers.
Well, thank you. I'm the daughter of immigrants from Mexico. And so everything happening around DACA and the country right now with a lot of the anti-immigration policy is not just affecting people in my district, which is about 70% Latino, but it's very personal for me. And, you know, my mom came over for a better life for her kids. And when I got here, she said, you got to be a doctor or a lawyer. That's the only way you're going to get out of this world. And I see blood and I want to pass out. So I decided to go into law and ended up here. Just really sometimes still walk into the building and pinch myself and say, I can't believe I work here. To think that the daughter of immigrants, the youngest of 11, was able to make it, beat the odds, and come here to Washington now to fight for the very community that's under attack.
A lot of perspectives and input given on the topic of DACA. Where do you currently stand on this and a legislative fix by Congress?
You know, we've been hearing so many conflicting information, even from the visit yesterday at the White House. This is an issue for me. I have a family member who is a DACA recipient and hear so many heartbreaking stories. From the very beginning, we have been and continue to ask for a clean dream bill because we know if that went to a vote on the floor, we would have the votes. I've talked to my colleagues on the other side, but this is where they're playing political chicken, really, with people's lives. And so we're continuing to push to ask that there be a vote on the DREAM Act before ND spending bill as not part of anything else. We would just like a clean bill, a fix to this, especially because there's bipartisan support for this. And that's what we're pushing for. Now, the realities of Congress and the politics is different. And we know that there are discussions going on about what can be done where a compromise can be reached. But make no mistake, I want a clean bill, and that's what we're still pushing for.
Some Republicans say that border security and DACA have to go hand in hand. What's wrong with that approach?
Well, look, I sit on Homeland Security. We have had plenty of discussions. We've authorized funding. There's already 700 miles of border wall. There are border security measures in place. There are places where we can add border security measures. Look, yesterday, I had a hearing on Homeland Security. And the ports of entry, our airports, our seaports, which, by the way, are the bigger threat to terrorism in this country, is where we should be investing money. And those are borders, and those are ports of entry that we really should be spending money on. Every person that's come into my committee will tell you that any kind of a wall is like a speed bump. It's not going to solve the problem, and it's really, I think, a waste of dollars. And so could there be discussion about adding some border security measures? Sure. We do that all the time in Homeland, though. It's not a new topic. It's become more politicized, unfortunately, with the president in his, anti-immigration and anti-immigrant speech.
If there is some give that, as far as funding for border security, what's acceptable for you? What can you vote on? Well,
I'm not looking to even start there because we have the support for a DREAM Act. That's the real starting point. Why don't we just put this thing to a vote? Because if we did, I don't think you would even have to go down that road. Right? That should be a conversation that's part of comprehensive immigration reform. And I think that that's the appropriate place to have it. We, for a moment, got a little glimpse from the president who said he was willing to do that, which I think would be the more appropriate way to go on this.
Do you hold to that, though, as far as what you saw and heard from the president about that yesterday?
No, we know he put out a tweet later on, and this is the reality. We can't trust this president when it comes to immigration. And that's why I'm working hard to talk to my colleagues on a bipartisan basis in Congress, because they'll tell us behind closed doors, and some of them have been pretty vocal as well, that they're willing to support the DREAM Act. The problem is with the leadership who won't put it to a vote. I mean, just take a look at what happened yesterday. We had the president on camera saying he was willing to do the Clean DREAM Act and then move in a second stage into the comprehensive immigration reform. But it was Leader McCarthy who had to step in And he had to say, wait, Mr. President, that's it. And he had to stop him and try to save the president at that moment into to going backwards. And so it's I think that gives us the political reality of there are conversations, there's going to be something. We haven't seen a whole lot of anything from Republican leadership on this. All we've heard is what the president has put out, which is too far extreme. I know that there are conversations going on the Hill on what that would mean. Look, I would support having more CBP officers, Custom and Border officers down at the ports, where our seaports are there. I actually had more funding to go to airports. So there are areas where we could supplement our ports of entry, and I think that is a place that would be a fine compromise.
Nanette Barragan joining us for until 9:30 to talk about these issues of DACA and Dreamers. If you want to ask her questions, Democrats 202-748-8000, Republicans 202-748-8001, Independents 202-748-8002. Do you take any comfort from that decision from the California judge saying that for now the DACA program has to remain in place?
It's a great start, but I'll be honest with you, I think we've seen the Supreme Court hold a prior decision of his. I have to tell people we really can't let up on the Hill on the legislation. Congress has to fix this. This shouldn't be a legal issue. At this point, Congress has to fix this, and we know there is support across the country for this, and we know there's support in the House and the Senate for this. We just got to get it to a vote.
First call for you comes from Kent, and Kent is in Princeton, New Jersey. Democrats on line. You're on with our guest, Nanette Barragan. Hello.
Hi, Representative Barragan.
Hi.
I have had a middle ground idea for a long time, and you used the word citizen, and I would give that the word citizen up for both the Dreamers and for their parents. I have the idea that if the parents have been here 10 years or 12 years and been upstanding members of their communities, not upstanding citizens, but not citizens, and they've been working and they've been, paying property tax through rent probably, and they've been contributing in other ways. And I would even go so far as to say if they never had anybody going after them for a felony, but that they might have been involved in what most states call misdemeanors and we call disorderly conduct offenses, or disorderly persons or something like that. The point is that even if they had that, if they had 2 or 3 such charges in a single event, we know that they don't get good representation and they might be told to plead by a public defender. I would even ignore that. I would call them an upstanding member of the community. And I would say let's get them all onto a type of card. The card I have in mind is a non-green card. I don't care if it's yellow or blue or red or purple or any other color. That card would entitle them to be a permanent resident of the United States. Any contributions they make through legitimate employment into the Social Security or to FICA, to all those programs, they're entitled to the benefits that they're contributing to. Maybe some people on the Republican side wouldn't want to give them Pell Grants because of how they got here, but I'd say, hey, let them have student loans. They're going to pay that money back.
Okay, we'll leave it there and let our guest respond.
Well, thank you for your ideas. I made a few notes. Certainly, you could take your ideas back to Washington and to some of the conversations when we get, I think, a little closer to the immigration, comprehensive immigration reform. Now, there actually is a bipartisan support to put Dreamers on a pathway to citizenship. And there are quite a number of bills on that. The DREAM Act is one of those bills. And so I think for now, continuing on where we have that bipartisan support is a good idea. I agree with you that there are so many immigrants that come to this country who have been good members of the community, who have paid taxes, who work, who contribute to this economy, and that we should take a look at those situations so that families are not broken up. We keep them together, and we have an opportunity to let them contribute to enrich this country of ours. So thank you for your ideas.
This is Malik, Arlington, Texas, Independent Line.
How you doing this morning?
Good morning. Thank you.
I just like to say you have solidified me to never ever vote Democrat again. And I've been a lifelong Democrat since I've been able to vote. The fact that you are pushing for a DACA program for 800,000 people, or a DREAM Act for people who came here illegally, parents who came here illegally, obtained employment here, used resources here, went to schools here, and didn't do anything for them wars, World War I, Vietnam, Civil War, Revolutionary War, didn't do any of these things to come here and have a better life, which is fine. But the country that they've come from hadn't evolved until the point where they wouldn't need mass immigration from that country. Secondly, do you push for criminal justice reform when you have millions of people who have felony convictions from 25, 30 years ago who still can't vote? Were you upset in island of Hispaniola when the Dominican Republic kicked all the Haitians out of the country? You say these immigrants are under siege? They've gotten a good deal coming here. They've jumped the line ahead of people who started the process legally. They send their money back to their country, but the currency exchange is well advantage for them, which is fine. But whose job did they take? Whose opportunity did they take? 11 children? Your parents had 11 children living here? Did they pay for schools or put school board taxes in to send the schools that they were going to? My grandparents had to bust their knuckles just to vote in this country, and they come here and get all the resources necessary to them.
Okay, caller, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Actually, you raised a big issue that actually will highlight one of my guests for the State of the Union. The issue of deported veterans. We actually have immigrants who come to this country who can pick up a weapon and they can fight overseas in a combat zone. And if they die, the government will make them a United States citizen. But if they survive, they can come back to this country and they can still be deported. And that is a tragedy. It's a real injustice, I think. And this is something where we have heard some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say that they want to help support to fix the situation. But look, immigrants come to this country, they contribute to our economy, they become our doctors, they become our nurses, our teachers, and are paying taxes and are part of this rich country. And I have to say, when you take a look at the issue of veterans who go and serve and then come home and can be deported, like this should be at the forefront of the things that we're talking about, and it's not. My guest who is going to be coming for the State of the Union is one of those people. Came to this country, was an immigrant, signed up, went and fought, and then got deported. Now, in his situation, he was able to come back. He had the governor's help and was able to come back. He lives in my congressional district. We're going to be bringing him to the State of the Union to highlight this issue and see if we can bring awareness to it, because most people don't know this. And look, I was just in Afghanistan for the Thanksgiving holiday to visit our troops overseas. I talked to them, and they will tell you they don't care about the status of those that are fighting next to them, those who are on their saving their lives and who have their backs. And so I think in this instance, you raised an issue that is one we need to look at, our veterans.
Representative, you won't be surprised by this, but the president just tweeted about the topic of the southern border, saying this, as I made very clear today, this is from the discussions, our country needs the security of the wall on the southern border, which must be part of any DACA approval. Fundamentally, do you think that some type of agreement will happen by March? If not, what happens then?
Well, I have to remain hopeful, and I think we have to continue the conversations with our colleagues, because at the end of the day, I think if we get something on a bipartisan basis that the legislators can agree to on the House and the Senate side, and they send it to the president, I'm hopeful that we can have leadership talk to him and get him to sign off on something like that. We will have to see what they come up with, what is put onto the table. But I will be the first to tell you, as somebody who sits on Homeland Security, the use of $18 billion on a border wall is a real waste of money. It really is. It should go to things like our children's health insurance program that we need to have funded, disaster relief that hasn't been done. And certainly we can use some of that money to put into our airports and our seaports. There are plenty of areas where there are shortfalls in filling some of the vacancies that keep our country safe. From the prime target, which I think the greater target, no doubt, is terrorism. Just take a look at what's happening in airports, what's happening on how immigrants are coming to this country that have been linked to terror attacks. And so you don't hear stories of terrorists coming through the south border wall. And so it's really unfortunate to see the president go back to the wall. This is where it makes our job more difficult in Washington to get the legislation done. And I tell people, look, if this president was serious about DACA, we would have a vote today, because the Republicans have control of the House, they have control of the Senate, and they have the presidency. If they were serious on DACA, we would get that vote today, it would have passed today, and we could move on and we could talk about the other important issues facing Congress.
The president actually did address security issues when talking his desire for more border security. I want to play you a little bit of what he said about the topic yesterday and get your response to it.
Great.
The chain migration is so insidious. It is the fundamental flaw in the immigration policy in the United States. If any conversation about DACA is being held without that consideration, I agree with border security as well, but any conversation about that is not going to go anywhere in the United States Senate. And if we think we're going to divide one side versus the other, that's just not going to happen on this issue.
David, I think chain migration has taken a very big hit over the last 6 months. You know, people are seeing what's happening. People, for instance, the man on the West Side Highway that killed the people and so badly wounded. You know, it's incredible when they talk about wounded. They don't say that arms are off and legs are off. One person lost 2 legs. You know, nobody talks about it. They said 8 died, but they don't talk about the 12 people that have no legs, no arms, and all of the things. So I'm talking about everybody. I really believe that when you talk about the subject that we're all mentioning right now, I think they had, how many people came in? 22 to 24 people came in through him. This is a killer. This is a guy who ran over many people, 8 died. 10 to 12 are really badly injured. So I really think that a lot of people are going to agree with us now on that subject.
Representative, what goes through your mind when he makes those connections?
Well, this is the president again making immigrants look like criminals and generalizing it. Look, there is no dispute, even amongst Democrats in my party, that when you have criminals, murderers, rapists, those people should be sent back. That is something that is undisputed. But what we're seeing happen, unfortunately, with the president and some members of Congress is this huge just brush stroke over immigrants and that they're bad people and they're criminals. And that's not the case. And so it's unfortunate to hear, you know, the whole concept of chain migration and ending that is really more of separating families, keeping families apart, when in essence, people and families are better together and really have been contributing to this country. It's unfortunate to see the rhetoric. I'm not surprised.
Representative Nanette Barragan, member of the Homeland Security Committee, Democrat from California, serves the 44th District. Linda in Kentucky, Republican line, you're next for our guest. Go ahead.
Yes, I have a comment about the immigration status here, that there's so many now flooding into our country. It puts a threat to the American people that scares them. I think that should be taken into consideration by the immigrants. When they cross the border illegally, that makes them a criminal. And when they do that, isn't that the same as just coming in with to steal? I mean, they are trying to steal their way into here. The man that called in from Texas, I really appreciated his comment. He made perfect sense. And that's the way a lot of Americans feel about the situation. Really what I wanted to ask you was, you say you were immigrants here from Mexico, and what I don't understand is why the immigrants that come in here, why do they think our there? Why do they want to come in here and claim that they're building and working to build our country better, when really it's not true?
Okay, caller, you're cutting out a little bit only because we'll cut you short. Apologies for that. From what she said, though, anything you want to take from that?
Well, I think first it's a myth that there's a flood of immigrants coming into this country. It's actually been stable for the last decade. So that is something that's not accurate, and I think it's been pretty stable. Look, for my parents, it was coming to this country for a better life for their kids. And who would have imagined that when my mother came over to this country, that her youngest would one day become a member of the U.S. Congress? And the stories of people who come to this country and contribute, there's such a huge wealth of them. And I think that really, when you take a look at who immigrants are, this country is made up of immigrants. It's a country of immigrants. And so, I understand that people have a different perspective, but really think they contribute to this country. And I don't know if she had another particular question in there, but from what I heard, it was those were the 2 points.
We can go on to the next call. That's from Silver Spring, Maryland, Democrats line. Raymond, hi.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for taking my call. Congresswoman, my point is about the strategy for the midterm election. You know, Trump won the election in part because of immigration. And I think that the Republicans are going to use this DACA against Democrats. They're going to say, well, how come you didn't fight for the children health insurance program as hard as it seems like you're fighting for the DACA children? And I support DACA. I'm a Democrat, and I'm an immigrant too. But strategy, politically, don't you think you should fight more or equally for the S-chip program as hard as the Democrats are fighting for the DACA? That's my point.
Thank you for that. I think it's sometimes lost, but it shouldn't be. But Democrats have been fighting on the S-chip program and making sure the Children's Health Insurance Program is funded. It's actually one of about 3 measures, including DACA, the health insurance program, and disaster relief for places like Puerto Rico. And we have said, look, this is what we want to see in any type of a continuing resolution, any type of a year-end spending bill, because those are Democratic values and priorities. We are continuing to fight on the Children's Health Insurance Program. What I will tell you is, not long ago in the House, we actually had a vote on this issue, and Republicans have offered to pay for the Children's Health Insurance Program by taking that money from seniors. And that's no way to do it either. And I think that is what the holdup is here. We will continue to fight on the DACA issue and on the CHIP program. Listen, DACA has bipartisan support amongst Democrats and Republicans across the country. And this is something that is actually an issue that people want us to work on in a bipartisan fashion. So they can use it, but I don't think it is the one that's going to get them to really get a whole lot of support. If you take a look at things like the tax plan, and not to go too much off topic here, but those are things that Democrats are going to be pointing out to see, look, who's being helped by the other party has been the top 1%, and those at the bottom are really going to pay the price. It's going to only hurt and increase income inequality, and those are the issues that we will make central in the next election.
But Republicans could take that and say, you bring up the tax cut. Democrats didn't want to give you a tax cut. Democrats didn't want border security because they want for support of DACA. Those are political messages too, especially coming up in 2018.
They could be, but when you take a look, I think, at the details of how the tax program works, I just don't see how it's going to pan out, and we'll have to see what the voters think. I mean, even the tax plan isn't a popular thing across the country on both sides, and so that is something that I think people understand what's happening there.
Ashland, Ohio, independent line. Gary's next.
I have 3 questions. 1, what is the cost of the illegal immigration? Number 2, what is the cost of legal immigration? And 3, what is the ideal population of the United States, considering we have 90 million people unemployed or underemployed?
Thanks, caller.
Well, I can tell you that immigrants to this country contribute in 2016 about $2 trillion to the GDP. So they're actually adding to the economy and helping the economy. And as far as population in the United States, look, I can't even begin to answer that question on what the population should be. I'm not one to start entertaining policies where we're starting to limit how many children people could have. But there's certainly, a lot of issues in that, and I wouldn't even know where to start.
Sandy from Florida, Republican line. You're next up.
Hi, I want to try to make this succinct. One thing I would like you to do is to please try to tell Latino-speaking people to please try to speak English when you're out in public if you can, because it makes us feel like we're kind of like being excluded when you don't try to mix in with us. The second thing I wanted to say was I remember as a teenager through the Mariel boat lift when all that occurred, and I went out looking for a job. I couldn't get a job because everywhere I looked, they started saying you had to be bilingual. Of course, in America, I couldn't speak Spanish. So I do think they need to make a greater effort to assimilate. Another thing I wanted to say is when you say they work so hard, my sons work 2 and 3 jobs. They got scholarships, they got degrees, and they still work hard. They're not working hard, not just immigrants and DACAs, but they're working hard for their families. They're not serving us voluntarily.
Okay. Carla, you put a lot out there. Let us respond.
I can understand how difficult it is and how in today's age you can get a college degree and it's still people are having a hard time finding jobs, and that's something that we're certainly trying to address and making sure that we create more opportunities and that we can help grow the economy. And so I can understand and feel, your financial pain and that ability. As to your comment about speaking Spanish in public, look, I'd be the first to tell you I have no issue with people doing that. I do it myself. I certainly don't do it to try to make anybody feel out of place. Some of us just feel that there are certain people who feel more comfortable. Look, my mother was Spanish speaking, was her first language. My first language was Spanish. When I talk to my mother, I do it in Spanish, whether I'm in public or in private, because that is how she and I best communicate with each other. I will tell you that this is something that we hear every now and again about, but in Los Angeles, for example, where I represent, it's a benefit to be bilingual because we have such a growing population of people who speak different languages. And I'm not just talking about Spanish. There is a need for translators in different levels of businesses, within the military, and I think encouraging our youth to have a second language is a good thing. Look, when I was in high school, they required that. And so I think that this is actually a positive to have people speak 2 languages. I certainly encourage those coming to this country to learn English, to integrate as best possible. And the reality is that I think if you know 2 languages, it's an asset these days.
Annette Barragan, a member of the Homeland Security Committee, Democrat from California, serving the 44th District. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, another perspective from Arizona Republican Paul Gosar on immigration policy, how it could impact a possible government shutdown. That discussion up next.